Bloom, Chapter 15. Do you think they're going to invade? Petra asked quietly. Haven't they already? Said Anaya. Only with plants. Anaya snorted. Only plants. Yeah, well, those plants are pretty good at killing people. And if the black grass keeps going, it's going to starve everyone to death. She and Petra were waiting alone in the small examination room curtained off from Dr. Weber's lab. Through the wall, she heard the bang, 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 bang of the MRI machine scanning Seth. They'd been taking turns, so no one had to stay too long inside the claustrophobic tube. So far, she'd done 2 shifts. The first with her head in a weird kind of cage, the second with her torso wrapped in coils. Petra nodded. I guess you're right. The plants are doing all their dirty work. They're trying to wipe us out, Anaya said, and we're part them. She'd taken a long, hot shower earlier, but she knew she couldn't wash away that fact. It was inside every cell of her body, and there was absolutely nothing she could do about it. I just want Dr. Weber to fix us, Petra said. I don't want to change anymore. We might not. Petra's eyes were darting everywhere, and Anaya could tell she was panicking. If I change into that thing Seth showed us, I'll be a monster, and who could ever love me? Anaya knew those were the unspoken words. She'd wondered exactly the same thing. Petra's whole body sagged, and she looked at Anaya with the helpless eyes of a small child. Your parents, Anaya told her. Your friends. Me. Petra was shaking her head. I won't be me anymore. Anaya took her hands. No matter what happens, we'll still be us. It seemed so ridiculous now. All the time she'd spent worrying about how she looked on the outside, how much pleasure she was taking in her new, prettier face. Who knew if it would even last? Even with normal people, your outside changed all the time. Maybe the you traveling inside your body was the only thing you had any control over. Petra seemed a bit calmer now. Anaya was glad it was just the 2 of them, without the social worker hovering around asking how they were feeling about everything. Carlene had said she went to check on her grandmother and would be back before noon. It was strange to think of people having normal family things to do right now, visiting a senior's home, buying food, taking care of a child with a cold. And I couldn't sit still, so she paced. She peeped through the curtain into the lab. Dr. Weber's staff were working busily at their screens and instruments, decoding their DNA and blood, mapping their mysteries. All the scientists had stared when they'd arrived this morning. They all knew. She wondered what they saw. Kids, freaks, alien monsters. She hoped Dr. Weber was right, and they could all be trusted to keep secrets. Dr. Weber parted the curtain and came inside the waiting room. How are you guys doing? Do you need more juice or snacks? Did you see anything in my scans? Petra asked, sitting up tensely. We're just logging images right now, Dr. Weber told her. It's going to take some time to analyze the results. Petra sagged into her chair, foot tapping. Dr. Weber sat down, and Anaya recognized Seth's sketchbook among her file folders. She thought Seth must really trust her to let her look at it. It's quite a collection of images, isn't it? Dr. Weber said, catching her glance and patting the cover. Petra let out a big sigh. Yeah, if that's me in there, someone's going to put me in an aquarium or harpoon me. Dr. Weber rocked her head from side to side. I'm not sure how much weight we should give these pictures. Really? Said Petra hopefully. I'm a scientist. I prefer MRI imagery and genetics to dreams. How could Seth draw the pit plants and the black vine before he'd ever seen it? Anaya asked. Very curious, I agree. There may be a genetic component to how we dream, certain images hardwired into our brains. Anaya thought of her dreams, running and jumping, Petra swimming, Seth's flying. Do you think each of us is a different kind of cryptogen? She asked, like a different species? One lives on land, one lives in water, the other lives in air? I don't know, Anaya. But we're not going to turn into them, right? Petra said anxiously, pointing at the sketchbook. We're only half them. And so far, Dr. Weber said, your human DNA clearly has the upper hand. So far, Petra murmured. But why'd they even do it? The cryptogens. Why'd they make us? Anaya's mind had been twisting through this exact same rabbit warren of questions. You can't be the only ones, the doctor said. My own son wasn't the only other child born with Seth's condition. I looked into it, and I'm wondering if we'd find teenagers who fit the profiles of you two as well, all conceived at the same time. It might be a sizable sample group. Anaya winced at her choice of words. Sample group. That was the term her father used when studying certain plants and other specimens. With a chill of realization, she said, Are we an experiment to see if they could live on Earth? Dr. Weber said nothing, but Anaya could tell by the way her eyes moved that she was thinking hard. To see if they could survive in our ecosystem? Dr. Weber said, our atmosphere, our bacteria, our plants. So we're like lab rats, Petra said. And maybe we didn't do so well, Anaya said, nodding at Petra. You got allergic to water, and I got allergic to everything, not exactly prime specimens. And then the big rain came, said Petra, and new plants grew. All those seeds, Anaya said. It seems so obvious now, to make a new ecosystem for themselves. Petra said, and your allergies go away, and I can wash with the rainwater. We need to tell Colonel Pearson, right? Anaya said. Everyone still thinks it's a bunch of random plants. This is way bigger now. I think the military has assumed from the start those seeds didn't come alone, Dr. Weber said. It was far too purposeful, Anaya inhaled. But no one knows. There's hybrids like us. No, said Dr. Weber, and I want to keep it that way for now. I'm worried about you three. If the news gets out, there's going to be a lot of fear and paranoia. You guys are completely innocent. You didn't ask for this. Anaya suddenly thought of her father, Dad, who wasn't really Dad. She felt all crunched up inside. Her father was just one of the pillars that held up her entire life. And it was just toppled. It shouldn't matter if he was her biological father. She knew that. But she wished she were half him and not something else. Dr. Weber handed her a tissue from the box, and she wiped her cheeks. Have you gotten through to my dad, she asked. Still trying. She pictured him on the eco-reserves and remembered the withering black grass from Mum's photo of Cordova Island, a blighted crop. An idea flared in her head. Maybe they really are farmers, she said. What if the plants weren't just set down to kill us? Maybe all that black grass really is food for them, or a nurse crop, to make the soil ready to grow something else. Go on, said Dr. Weber, listening carefully. So if we destroyed their crop, would they leave us alone? Would they go away? She waited for someone to say something. Petra was staring at her lap, lost in thought. Then she looked up. And would we stop changing? Petra asked. Think about it, Petra said, feeling suddenly hopeful. None of this started until that big rain and the plants started growing. That's when our bodies began changing. She looked at Dr. Weber. I know you said the plants and water have nothing to do with it, but they might be a trigger, said Dr. Weber. They didn't change your DNA, but they might have woken it up. You mean with chemical signals? Anaya said. Dr. Weber nodded. Everyone was exposed to the rain and the pollens, but in your case, maybe they flipped a switch. And if we could take all that stuff away, Petra said, then we'd go back to being normal. With a sinking heart, she watched the doctor let out a big breath. I don't know if it's that simple, Petra, but it's possible. Possible was something. Possible meant maybe. The picture of Seth's alligator thing slithered through her mind, and it was all she could do to not scream. She tried to slow breathe and didn't even finish her third breath. Her whole body was contaminated. Maybe those drawings were an extreme form of what she might become, but the fact was she was changing. Another big patch of skin had sloughed off her legs this morning. The new skin felt smooth, but how did she know it wouldn't turn into reptile scales? And her tail felt like it had grown a little bit longer. Can you take it off? She blurted out, my tail. She'd shown it to Dr. Weber before her first MRI scan. I think we should wait for the results. I don't want to wait. Dr. Weber leaned forward and took her hands. I can't imagine how scary this is for you. And yes, surgery is an option, but I'm not a surgeon, Petra. There must be at least one here on the base, right? Yes, but an army surgeon. If she sees it, our secret's out. I'm going to take care of you all, I promise. This is why we need to find my dad, said Anaya. You're spending all this time studying us, but if that soil on the eco-reserve kills the grass, then it might kill the other plants too. Agreed, Dr. Weber said. And there are teams all over the world working on herbicides. It's not just your father. But I'll put in a request with the colonel to send a team out to find him. Thank you, said Anaya. Seth should be coming out soon, said Dr. Weber. Petra, are you ready for another round? She nodded. This one was going to be of her lower body, and she was dreading what the scanner might find, waiting beneath her skin. Seth was still in the MRI tube when it happened. Last night the scars in his arms had been especially red and tender, and right now each was a hot flare of pain. He wanted to move his arms, but they were pinned to his sides by the mesh. They'd wrapped around his body. It was like being inside a coffin. He looked down at his bare forearms. Bang, 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 went the machine, loud, even through the headphones. On his left arm, some of the scars were like raised blisters. Something dark abruptly poked through his skin, and a cry of pain leapt from his mouth. It was a black, sharp-tipped quill, jutting out a couple centimeters, trickling blood. Another jab, and he looked over at his right arm, where a small bloodstain grew on his gown, just below his shoulder. Then the pain came fast and fierce, all up and down both arms. Bloodstains blossomed everywhere. Feathers. It was finally happening. He was getting feathers, like in his dreams, only so much more painful. He was excited and terrified and couldn't think straight. He wanted the pain to stop. He wanted to get out of his cage. He wrenched his arms to and fro and felt his new quills catch on the plastic mesh and tear it. Were they so sharp? After a few more strokes, the mesh fell away in tatters. With the machine still bang, bang, banging around him, he scrambled out of the tube. He stood there, gasping, blood dripping from his arms, and pulled back the sleeves of his gown so he could watch the last of the quills erupt. He looked up at the window and saw the two technicians staring in shock. Dr. Weber came running out. Seth, are you all right? Sit down. Dr. Weber eased him into a chair. It really hurts, he said. His arms throbbed. Can we get some painkillers? Dr. Weber called over her shoulder. She grabbed a pack of sterile swabs and began cleaning the blood off his arms. Careful, Seth said. They're really sharp. He was too late. Dr. Weber grunted as one of the quills jabbed through the swab and left a bright red line on her palm. They certainly are, she said, and continued to clean Seth's arms more carefully. Seth sat there, feeling like a child, but it made him calmer. He couldn't remember anyone ever taking this much care over him. He looked up as Anaya and Petra rushed into the room. Oh my God, Petra breathed, staring at his barbed, blood-streaked arms. You okay, Seth? Anaya asked. One of the technicians returned with a cup of water and some pills. Seth swallowed them. His hands were still shaking. Staring at the quills, he saw downy hairs growing from their sides, the beginnings of feathers. He looked up at Dr. Weber with sudden anxiety. Are you going to cut them off? Do you want me to? She asked. He shook his head. Then no, she said gently. I won't do anything you don't want. If you say they stay, they stay. Never in his life had Seth felt so grateful to anyone. For the first time, it was okay to be himself. He wasn't supposed to be something else. Thanks. They're quite flexible, Dr. Weber said. I think we can fold the quills flat against your arm and wrap them loosely, just so you don't cut anyone, or yourself. And so no one sees, he added. That too, said Dr. Weber. She got a roll of gauze, and he watched as she carefully wrapped down the quills on his right arm and taped it. She was halfway through his left when one of the technicians poked his head into the room and said, Colonel Pearson's just come in, and he's looking for you. Dr. Weber swore on her breath in panic. Seth looked at his taped arms, his blood-stained gown, the red swabs scattered all over the chair. From outside came the beat of hard official footsteps. Into the machine, Dr. Weber hissed at him. He clambered inside the tunnel and flipped onto his back, his lower half jutting out. Through the opening, he saw Anaya snatch up all the blood-stained swabs and clench them in her fist just as Colonel Pearson strode into the MRI suite. "Dr. Weber," he said. "Hello, Colonel," the doctor replied, glancing back over her shoulder as she fussed with some of the shredded mesh. "We're just about to start another round of imaging. How can I help you?" On the bottom part of his gown, Seth noticed a spatter of blood that must have dripped from his arm. To him, it looked as bright and red as a thing could look. He saw the colonel's eyes go right into the machine, then skip to Anaya. Between her fingers, Seth spotted some red-tinged swabs sticking out. "It's your father," Colonel Pearson told Anaya. "We got through to him." "He's on the phone?" Anaya asked, her voice breaking with excitement. "Right now?" "No, about 20 minutes ago, but we taped it. We had enough signal for a video call. When you're ready, we'll play it back for you in the comms room." End of chapter 15.